All right. Welcome, come on in. All right, so I'm guessing if you're here, you are interested in Cypress or Playwright or something about automated testing. And that's cool, because I like all of those things. Is there any, by show of hands, if you're a developer? Show of hands if you're a QA? Show of hands if you're a test engineer? Show of hands if you haven't shown your hand yet. Okay, cool. What's your role? Okay. 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 Could I hear? Is there a developer who wouldn't mind just saying like why you're here, like maybe what your interest in this talk is? Go ahead. Nice. Awesome. Love that answer. Somebody else? I thought I saw another hand. Go ahead. Okay, this is gonna be a fun talk for you then, I think. So, how about QA or ST or SDET? I don't. What's the preferred acronym? Yeah. I mean, anybody? What you're interested? I mean, obviously you guys are in the testing space, so. All right, that's good enough. I'm just trying to get a pulse on the room, like what people are interested in. That way I can speak a little bit more to maybe what you're looking for. So people are just coming on in. All right, let me just make sure this thing is recording too. It is. Maybe it'll go for an hour. All right, so I think we're gonna have some fun today. So this is fun for me. This was a roller coaster for me. I'm excited to share this journey with you. So first things first, if you are like, hey, I need those slides, I want that code, I'm gonna put everything, it might not be up there right away, but I will put everything in a repository on my GitHub. And these slides are already available online. And I'll show this at the end too. But luckily I was able to get my first and last name on both of those. So in terms of timing and schedule, tell you a little bit about me. We'll talk testing, like shop talk. We'll do a Cypress demo, talk about pros and cons. We'll do a Playwright demo. We'll talk about pros and cons, and then we'll wrap. And hopefully you guys can walk out of here with a clear understanding of what the benefits and trade-offs are with choosing either of these frameworks, and then maybe go back to your team and feel armed with some information. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about me. So this is my 4th year at CodeMash. This is my first time speaking. But for this year and last year, I brought my crew with me. So this is my wife and my kids. We just had a baby in November. So that's been fun trying to prepare for this and like managing that, as well as 2 little ones who are fairly independent. But they're here. We're going to the water park after this to celebrate, so it should be fun. I currently work at a startup in the data analytics space called Comparative. I started there about 6 months ago. I love it there. It's great. I get to work fully remote. I do live in the northern Ohio area. I live in Akron, so it's not too far drive from here for us. I'm also halfway through an MBA at Case Western, and I spent most of my software development career at Progressive Insurance. That's where I cut my teeth since 2015. And then I also got a chance to work within Progressive at level 20, which was a bunch of fun. But basically, like, we weren't doing insurance stuff. We were doing other things, and that was cool. My wife hates this slide, so I have to spend as little time as possible on it. I've given this presentation before internally at Progressive, and so I'm just going to turn this into like my testing experience. So all of those red triangles represent like significant moments in my experience of testing as an engineer. So it's cool. It's like I hover over it and it like pops up. I couldn't let this one go, but my wife was like, "You should kill it." So, but like 2015, I had no idea what I was doing, like writing a unit test. So like that was the first class that I took at Progressive. But really, okay. So I have to spend very little time on this. So where it gets interesting is in 2019, is I got to spend 4 months with our system test engineer team on one of our enterprise projects, and just writing end-to-end tests every day. And it was super fun, super cool. I got to learn about Protractor. I don't know, show of hands if you have worked with Protractor, familiar with it. Okay, it's a skill set you probably don't need to put on your resume anymore. We'll find that out. But anyway, so did that, and then came to CodeMash right at the head of 2020. So this is before the pandemic really hit. And I learned about Cypress in January of 2020. And I was like, what? Actually, somebody tried to introduce Cypress at Progressive maybe a year before that. But it would like went right over my head, and I couldn't hear it. But I had just struggled with Protractor for 4 months, and then I saw Cypress, and I was like, that does what I need. So I went to level 20, greenfield tech stack within Progressive. I said, we're going to use Cypress if we're going to do testing, and the rest is history. All right, so there's also some time missing here. Like I said, this was an old slide. I wasn't going to mess with it. It's took me a long time, and I don't want to do it anymore. So where does Playwright fit into this? So later in 2019, I want to write. I'm out in Colorado with our team out there at Progressive, and we're doing some automated testing stuff. And I wanted to write a test for this problem we were trying to solve, this thing we were trying to test. And I knew if I was going to do it in Protractor, it was going to take way too much time. We had like Cucumber wrapped in front of it for like gherkin statements. It was just like, it was too much to get through. And I just wanted to see if I could automate it. So I was familiar with, at the time, Puppeteer. Show of hands if you ever heard of Puppeteer. Yeah, so it's an automation tool for primarily Chrome. So in about 20 lines of, by the way, this slide stinks. Like I would get raked over the coals in my MBA program if I put this slide up in a presentation there. I wrote 20 lines of code and did exactly what I needed to do in one file. It was amazing. It felt so good. So I fell in love. So 6 months later, right, I hear about Playwright, and somebody just says, it's Puppeteer cross-browser. And I was like, boom, that thing's going to be awesome. Cypress at the time was primarily Chrome, and then I knew Microsoft was sitting behind Playwright. So kind of all of those things together, even though Playwright was like in its infancy at the time, I was like, this thing has serious potential. I don't know whether to answer that or not. Like, let me in. All right, so let's talk testing. And I'll get through this quickly because I want to get to the demos. All right, so my thesis for this talk, the thing I'm trying to convince you of or provide support for, is that testing is hard, and we should prioritize the developer experience. And so use Cypress. However, Playwright's pretty awesome too. I am biased, but my goal is to present the facts and let you decide for yourself. All right, so I want to go through some principles, like shared value systems. This is the way I think about testing. You may or may not agree with all of these things that are up here, but maybe some of them will challenge your thinking. Maybe you'll be like, yes, we need that. But why test? And the answer is confidence. It's not code coverage. I'm sorry. I've spent since 2020 working in startup-esque environments, and like I feel like the concern for get the product out the door and start maybe seeing if we can learn from customers, but because it's going to be so long before we really start making money on this thing, like testing for code coverage just doesn't cut it. And so what really has really become important for me when I'm working in that environment has been, I'm also on call because there's only a few of us developers working on this thing for all of our customers that we don't yet have. And I need to be able to sleep at night and not get a phone call because something's broken. So for me, testing is all about confidence and risk mitigation, and you can never mitigate all of the risk. You would be testing until you're dead, and you'd still not be done. So it's all about risk mitigation. So then the conversation becomes for us about where do you stop mitigating the risk? So it's really at what point are you confident enough to ship the code you just wrote? By the way, to drive that point home, when I talk to people at work, it freaks them out. I'm like, we could write no tests. And they're like, what? You would write no tests? Yeah, I would, because that's a risk I'm willing to accept. All right, another principle. And I was guilty of this early in my testing journey. Don't write test code from your source code. That is a bad idea. Because the test code should tell us how the system is supposed to work. And then when they're passing tests, it means the system is working the way it's supposed to. So we write our test code from the requirements, not from the source code. And I'm going to get into like kind of why, again, the door. Okay, so another principle, test on day one. So the way I think about testing is that writing a test has a cost, and that cost really doesn't change over time. You could maybe make an argument for it fluctuates or goes up or down here or there. I would actually argue it's more expensive to write the test before you write the source code, because that's really hard to do. But the point is that you're going to get the most value out of that cost on day one. All right, so I also like to think about like what is your test automation maturity as a team or an organization? I think about it in these three levels, and it's really simple. You're either testing before you write source code, during, after, or you're just not testing. My favorite level to be at is level 2. It's hard to do, and it requires really awesome tooling to enable your developers and your team to write tests and not panic when that deadline's coming up and say, nope, scrap the test, we'll do it later. Right? Raise a hand, hands up if you've ever experienced that on your team. Okay, a few. The let's cut testing because we're running short on time and we got to ship this thing, right? To some extent, you have to at least experience, even if you still wrote tests, you cut something out probably. Yeah. Yes, end-to-end testing, but I think testing in general, manual testing, security testing, any kind of testing. To me, this is my mindset about testing. Now, unit testing probably follows more of you're writing the unit tests at level 2 or 3. But end-to-end testing to get to a maturity level of 2 or 3, I find in the organizations I've been at is much harder than unit testing at the same time. Does that answer your question? I'd rather be at level 0 than level 1. I hate level 1, and I've done it before. And that's been the strategy too. Has been we don't have time for this. Let's just get this V1 out the door, and then we'll write the automated tests. Yeah. If you didn't have time then, what make you think you're going to have time after that? And what I've learned is, as soon as you ship to customers for that V1 in a startup space, you're not going to have time. Because the customer is going to tell you in that first week all the things you need to fix about the stuff you just shipped. And so then it becomes like this game of, what were the requirements when I wrote that code? Let's go back to Jira or whatever ticketing tool you use and try to figure it out. That's not fun. I'd rather be in the headspace when I'm writing that test. I just wrote the code. That's the best time to write the test. So I'd rather not test. All right, so another principle, testing is hard, the tooling should make it easy. We talked about this already, I think, which is like, as an engineer, I feel this acutely. You're on a deadline, and it's like, all right, I'm just not going to write the test. But if the tooling makes it really easy to write the test you want to write, then more tests get written. Like more of that risk is mitigated. Another way I think about unit tests and end-to-end tests is unit tests help me write better code, but end-to-end tests help me sleep at night. I feel this strongly too. Like if you're in an environment without automated tests and that code base grows over time, maybe you're a new engineer to the team, you haven't been on that journey with the rest of the team, you don't know what you might break, right? Automated tests, if you have a really strong automated test suite, like it gives you that fearlessness to code fast and maybe even a little recklessly because you know you have that safety net behind you. This is one that I don't think gets talked about enough. Automated tests are the best form of documentation. I had an engineer friend take a new job. I called him at the end of that first week on the new job. I said, how's it going? What have you been up to? I've just been reading automated tests all week. What? It tells me exactly how the app is supposed to function, and then it shows me. That's amazing. So ever since then, I've been like, documentation is the best form. It doesn't lie, right? If the source code is the product, the tests are the documentation. All right, so this is my unpopular opinion. I like to have these debates with people who like to talk testing. If you could only choose one form of, this actually might be a good conversation to have with you. If you could only choose one type of automated tests, so you think of like all the different levels, you could even throw security in there. So unit testing, integration testing, system integration, end-to-end, anything you can think of, right? Which would you choose? You can only choose one. For me, that's end-to-end. And that goes back to the earlier principle of like unit tests help me write better code, but E2E helps me sleep at night. And I'd rather have that. Interestingly enough, I walk into comparative. I already have these opinions going into comparative back in July. I open up the code base. I see Cypress, boom. Where are the unit tests? There aren't any. Yeah, I'm in the right place. It's exactly where I need to be. And the last one is perfection is just procrastination. I think sometimes we analysis paralysis, like we're trying to make it just right. Sometimes you just got to get scrappy and get it out the door. And that includes when you write your tests. So your tests aren't going to be, your source code may not be perfect, your tests shouldn't have to be perfect either. Be okay with that. You can iterate. All right. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. Okay, this is going to be fun. So let's talk about Cypress. So again, not one of my better slides, but so I went through the Cypress changelog because I am one who likes historical context, as you maybe can tell so far. Cypress comes out V1 in 2017, not even on my radar at that point. So when I discover Cypress is January 2020 here at CodeMash. So that's like right before this V4 release. And what's interesting about that V4 release is they made Firefox, so they started with Chrome only, just like Puppeteer. And so then shortly after CodeMash, and I learned about Cypress, they come out with Firefox beta support, I think, which is, it's just Firefox. And then Edge. I think Edge was easy because it also runs on Chromium like Chrome does. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but so that was big, right? Because like here I am excited about Cypress, trying to pitch it to people, and they're like, "Wait, it only works on Chrome." I'm like, "Yeah, but they're coming. They're coming." Okay. And then V10 was significant because the UI experience changed. So I was on V9 like prior to this talk, and then I had to upgrade as part of this talk. I'm like, whoa, this is different. So, which is fine. It was great. So there's some other stuff in there, but kind of not important based on. So at this point with what we're going to cover. And by the way, I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to cover the stuff I think is really important. We need something to test. So I have this app. It's event registration. I didn't want to do like a to-do app. I just feel like that game is so outplayed. So like, let me just take something I've already built, and we'll just write some tests against it. Because guess what? I didn't have time to write tests, and I shipped it anyways. So, or I didn't think I was willing to take the risk. Anyways, so event registration, this is the app we're going to be testing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, just so we have a shared understanding. But effectively, there's admins, so people who have superpowers in the app. There's registrars, people who can register other people, other attendees for the event. Then there's group leaders. This is like a weird nuance for this particular client, where it's like certain registrars can only work with certain groups of people. And then we're not gonna cover everything, but we'll go through some of the core requirements or transactions within the application, which are CRUD, create, read, update, delete, event registrations for attendees, and whatever groups they may be assigned to. We're also going to be able to allow admins, and I think registrars may be able to do it now, but they can add other users to the application, so system users. Upload third-party registrations. This is a weird thing, but like registrations can come in from somewhere else, and so we need to get them into the single source of truth system. And then just monitoring system activity, so like who's doing what, because we're all touching the same attendee registration information. Does that make sense? Maybe? Okay. I realize it's not a to-do app, so that'll level set. You guys ready for a demo? Yeah. All right, cool. Oh, thank you. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is spin up the app locally. That's not the right window. It's going to look like this. I'm going to let it load for a second. But, so I've got here is my repository. Can you guys see this okay? Maybe I'll blow this up a tick. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better, right? All right, so in the E2E folder is Cypress. Some folks will just name the root folder Cypress, but I like to be a little bit more agnostic than that in my naming. So it's E2E and then Cypress gets thrown in there. But it's completely isolated, and it could stand alone as its own repository, quite frankly. By the way, this is a monorepo, so you're going to see packaged JSON files. React, raise your hand. Angular, Vue. Wow, Vue, what's up? You guys are around. That's cool. I did Vue once. It's pretty cool. Anyways, I'm going to be in React. I'm sorry if you're an Angular or Vue, but the concept, we're going to be writing basically the tests in Cypress and Playwright are going to look just like the tests in Angular, because when I gave this presentation 2 years ago, I tested an Angular app. I had to, because I had to compare it with Protractor. So the tests are identical. So we're not going to be really looking at any code that you wouldn't otherwise recognize from across those different SPA frameworks. How are we doing? Okay. All right, so I got my app spun up. Inside this Cypress folder I'm going to explain a couple of things. The E2E folder, some of this is new for me because like I just upgraded and I'm like, okay, that changed. So it used to be like an integrations folder is where the tests lived for Cypress. And when I say this is where things live, Cypress, when you install it, gives you all this like out of the box. Like you install Cypress and then it's like run test and you're off. I'm going to do that now actually. But anyways, the E2E folder is where our test files will live, and they end in this sci.ts. That's also new. Used to be like test. You could call it spec or you call it whatever you want. You probably still can. But they out of the box, it's sci.ts. In this support folder is going to be a lot of like utility functions and stuff to make my tests readable. Because remember, testing, I have this like principle that testing is the best form of documentation. The last thing I want to do is walk into a test and see, 100 lines of code and like be trying to dissect what is this thing doing. I want to try to communicate in my test, the top level, what that thing is functionally doing, and let my utility support commands do the grunt work behind the scenes. So you'll see like commands in here, there's a ton of them. These are custom Cypress commands. I've got some like data generation utilities because one of the weird things that I do is I don't delete the test data. I just let it sit there. So I have to have this like randomized data all the time. Okay, You guys are like, let's go. Then of course this thing opens up in not a. All right, so I just ran yarn test and this like UI opened up, right? I don't know if you're used to something else. Probably in the command line, something just starts running, right, and starts printing out like it's running 6 tests. So Cypress is completely like UI based, and I love that about it, especially for this type of testing. There is like a headless option. That's going to be for your CI. So this is new because they like went whole hog on component testing, which is like for you React developers, like React testing library. It's like could be a competitor with that. You're spinning up components and testing. You know, it's kind of at the integration level, or I guess you could call it unit test. But so, anyways, let's kick this open. So it's going to let me choose a browser. I'm going to go with Chrome. By the way, like it will only let you choose the browsers you have installed on your machine. So like this morning, I didn't have Firefox. So I downloaded it. As soon as I downloaded it, I opened this up, boom, it recognized it. Oh, we found Firefox. You can run your tests on Firefox now. All right, cool. So this is new about the UI. I'm so used to like opening it up and then it will just run all the tests. But now it's going to show you all of the tests and let you pick and choose what you'd like to run. I haven't yet found how to run all. So I'm just going to run them like one file at a time. But the first one I'm going to run is this E2E file, which is effectively like test code I had already written well before I had planned this talk. And so the goal here is to show you the power of, this is Cypress. This is what makes Cypress. So over on the left-hand side, you're seeing all of the individual coding steps. On the right, you're seeing the video. You know, so it's really fast. And so like you'd be like, whoa, slow down, Kyle. We'll get the chance. So this is running through 2 primary tests. One is I want to make sure a registrar can log in, create a registration, update a registration, delete a registration, and then make sure the activity log is updated. So some of those requirements I was talking to you guys about in that slide, that's what the first test was. So registration CRUD, right? Can my registrars log in, create a registration, update it, delete it? And then is the activity log being updated? Those are some of the requirements. And the second one is that, I don't remember why this test got priority, but probably when I was creating the group leader feature. But admins can create group leaders, and then there's a bunch of things that happen associated with that. We're going to focus primarily on the first test. So now that this test run is over, they both passed. I'm going to expand this. Now, one of the things that's cool about Cypress is every time you run a new test, it completely clears whatever your like cache or local storage or cookies are. So you're always starting with that fresh instance. That's annoying if you're trying to do the same thing over and over again at the start of every test, like, I don't know, log in. So there's this concept of sessions, which you see here. And so I'm actually logging myself into a session. And assuming I have the same login, test after test after test, you won't see in subsequent replays that login step because it's retained the cookies or the local storage. And so it's just going straight to what you're trying to test instead of like doing this login step. Okay, so we're going to replay through this test so you get a feel for how powerful Cypress is. So all these numbers are like the individual steps. And as I hover over them, I get to see what's happening in the DOM. So it's showing me step by step. Imagine being a new developer. And you're just like, let me go see what this app does, right? And so it's telling me all the data it's passing as well, how it's getting the data, etc. Oh, here's an assertion. So this is a point where our test probably could have failed. I'm expecting something to exist in the DOM. Oh, it's highlighted on the upper left. This is me saying like, okay, we logged in and something, I went to the next page I was expecting to go to. And then I think that's all of that session. So that's login. Then the rest of it is the actual test body. Okay, so go to this registrations page and let's add a new registration. So I click on that button. I can scroll through here. I'm entering all this test data, making my selections. Yeah. Are these live? Yeah, they are. Yeah, so I have the backend deployed actually in this case.
That's, I think I mentioned that. I mean, that's traffic that you're seeing that the UI is making.
Yep.
That's really badass in my opinion. Those features that I've seen. See what's going on, not just in the UI, but see that API call being made. So if that API call fails, UI is.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to see a test that fails because of an API call. But the other thing too is that Cypress added sci.intercept, which is intercept that network traffic and stub it or mock it, mock or stub. I never know which one. Okay, so you guys get the idea, right? Like this is pretty cool. And then check this out. Like, oh, I can click on it. It's now pinned it. But then like, oh, there's something in your console too, dude. Like it's telling me like, here was the command, here was the. Is that better? Oh, this was a really ugly one to choose because of the selector I have there. Usually I'm selecting on ID, but sometimes when I'm using a third-party package, I have to get creative. Let's see what this one does. Yeah. Yeah, so this one I'm grabbing by the submit registration ID, and it's saying, here's the element it yielded. Cool. Thanks, Cypress. Anyways, you can go through and do that. Okay, so that's still pretty good size. All right, so like you get the idea, okay? So let's go look at some code. All right, so this is the test we just ran. So that first test, that it block there, that's the test. Log in, add a registration, update a registration, delete a registration, log out. Now log the admin in and make sure they can view that activity history that just happened. None of that is native Cypress commands, right? But I'm trying to communicate to my fellow developers, this is what's happening. This is the documentation side of it. This is why I took time to talk about this stuff, because I actually think it's pretty important. Like I can show you a framework, but I think if there's not good practices and best habits underneath that, I feel like you're not taking it to its full advantage, or not doing as you should. Okay, I'll stop talking about that. Get off my soapbox. So anyway, so like let's go look at like login here for a second. So remember I told you about that session, size session, right? So I created a wrapper function called login, which is actually calling sci.session. Passing a username and password, visiting a route, executing the commands that log the user in, and then saying, okay, I'm done. And that session syntax is specific to sessions in order to take advantage of the performance benefits of using the same session over and over across tests. This is this get registration. I'm just getting, I think I'm getting some data, right? So remember, I don't delete the data, but I need, when I'm creating a new registration, I need a username, I need a first name, a last name, and I need their selections. And something else, I can't remember. I guess I'm not entering email. Oh, but I'm getting, I need like some uniqueness. So that's where that get random int, that's a 6-digit random integer that I'm throwing in there. Anyways, I don't know. Maybe you guys don't care about this stuff. I think it's cool. And then here's add registration, right? So all this is a wrapper function, but like here we're actually getting into like the native Cypress commands that you can execute. So like, hey, what's the Cypress URL? And then do some validation against it. And if it's not, if we're not there, like visit it. Click these items. Type my first and last name into those fields. et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like saying it out loud now. In my head, it seems cool, but like as I say it out loud, like it's not. It's just you're just filling in stuff, you know. Just grabbing an element, typing it in. This is I'll call out is for IDs. Like I'm lazy. I don't do like a custom attribute. I just use the ID. It's there. I try to keep it unique. So I am actually pulling from a shared enum between both my source code and my test code. So when I create an element in my source code, like a button, and I want to say, hey, this is the button for adding a registration, right? I stick that in an enum and give it a reasonable name, and then I share that magic string between both the source code and the test code. So then I'm just making sure I'm grabbing the same thing. And it forces me to put all these IDs in a single file because technically IDs are supposed to be what? Unique. So it helps me keep that uniqueness. Yeah. Sure. Good question. So why didn't I just wrap it in like a JavaScript function, right? That's your question? Yeah. So you don't have to do it this way. And in fact, probably most people would opt to do it as you're describing it. Because there's some extra work that comes to like configure TypeScript with custom commands. I have to tell Cypress like, hey, here's a custom command that I can call off of the Sci object. And then, oh, TypeScript, you need to know about this so you can give me some IntelliSense as I'm looking for it. Some people might opt to not do that. But I'll tell you this, there's a learning curve with Cypress because I don't use the word await ever in a Cypress test. That's weird. Like if you're like really comfortable with asynchronous JavaScript programming, you're like, boom, async, await. This thing is asynchronous, right? Can't do that in Cypress. And that's the learning curve. At least it was for me. That was the learning curve with Cypress, was like unwinding some of that and like trying to understand how Cypress is managing that. So that is why I'm using Cypress commands, because when I'm writing my tests, I'm in this Cypress headspace of sci dot. But I didn't do it for all of them, right? Like I even like here this get registration, that's just a function. So I don't know. I guess it's a mixed bag. I'm not perfect. All right. Let's look at some other tests. So these are two tests. Let's do the users. Let's do individuals first. So I wrote these three tests like for this presentation. So they're a little bit scrappier, right? I've got hard-coded strings in here. But this one was, I wanted to showcase one thing that I thought was cool, which is, and I'm going to go to the app here because I'm an admin. I just built this like last month for my client. Don't judge me if you think the CSS is terrible, I know. But I needed a way for them to import these registrations because this is the source of truth for event management when we have 1,000 people who come to the conference. And we have to print name badges for everybody. Like it's nice to have all that information in a single source. But registrations come in from a third party as well. And so there was this like, okay, let's just export it to a CSV and import it. And then, do some fancy work to like auto register. So I can like, auto register Randy Peck here. And now it's like his registration's in the system. So it's going to speakers Friday and Saturday. But I can choose a file. So I have this individuals file. I open it, I upload it, okay? And every registration or every upload tells me like, okay, here's the data coming in and we've matched it with data already in the system or not yet in the system. But I wanted to show you this, if for nothing else I thought this was cool. And I don't know that this was available until recently, but there's a command for like, go pick a file and stick it inside of a input file, a file input element. I thought that was cool. That was it. It was awesome. So I'll run this test, like, get out of here. Go back to my specs, individuals. Boom. And I didn't go much further than just upload it and then validate that like Randy Peck's name appears in the list. Like that's as far as I got. But I thought that was cool. Anyways. All right, let's run this test. Users. So this is admin creates a registrar. So this is like when we get started for the conference every year, it's me and this other guy, and we're just like, all right, who's on the registration team this year? Put them in the system so they can have access. So I want to make sure that this works. Otherwise, we can't do anything. So I wrote a test for it. So the admin logs in, goes to user page. We'll just run it. So the test failed. Now I got to debug it. This is where Cypress comes in handy. Okay. So I'm going to run through the test. Okay, so I'm adding a new user. I've typed in the first name, the last name, and then I can see, oh, it didn't work. Shoot, what happened? All right, let me look at this error message on the left. Looks like you were trying to, it actually failed trying to do the next step. And that next step, like the modal didn't clear because it was unsuccessful. And so I couldn't type in the search bar because it was hidden behind that in that upper right. Okay, cool. That doesn't tell me why this failed. But I think this will. And so I clicked on it. I've opened up the console, and I'm going to look at the response headers. And I see this. Username exists exception. Oh yeah, I forgot to randomly put like a 6-digit random integer on the email, and emails have to be unique when we create registrations. That was pretty quick. Anyways, so that was me. So it was down here, like this step right here is get the user email and type this in. There's already a user in the system that has that email, so I went through and fixed that, right? So all I've done is add this get this random int, add it to the end of the last name, add it to the email. By the way, show of hands if you're familiar with plus addressing. Okay, a few. That's like my favorite hack for like testing emails. It's like I can just send everything to the same email. So anything after the plus is like it's like an alias. The system recognizes it as a different email, but it all goes to the same inbox. Pretty cool. Some cases you have to enable it. So, all right, it's 12:30. You guys want to talk about Playwright? Well, let's finish up on Cypress and then we'll talk about Playwright. All right, so pros and cons list of Cypress. Number one, debugging. Like this is like for me, my thesis is prioritize that developer experience. So for debugging, like that's top priority for me. This is why I love Cypress. Auto waits. Man, when I was in Protractor land, it was like, oh shoot, we need to wait like an extra 3 seconds here for this step. Let me insert a little like extra wait. Oh, let me do that here. Let me do that there. You don't have to do any of that in Cypress. In fact, when I'm reviewing code for our engineers writing Cypress tests and I see that stuff, I'm like, you're doing something wrong because Cypress does it for you. Now, what happens if something takes 5 minutes, right? There's a timeout. You get to set the timeout. Like, hey, I'm willing to wait this long for something until I'm finally like, all right, like, peace. Browser supports Chrome, Edge, Firefox. Documentation is outstanding. The community is outstanding. There's a lot of people who have gotten behind this framework and are pushing it to be better. And it works out of the box. Downside, there's a learning curve. I felt that acutely myself. I've seen it happen with other engineers who are new to the framework, and they're just like, maybe I shouldn't write Cypress tests. So that's not cool. It's hard. Safari, it's not supported. TypeScript config took me like 2 days of straight work just to configure TypeScript. I hate it. You won't have to because it'll be up in the shared files if you want to use TypeScript with Cypress, or I'm missing something that they've updated and don't know about. And then there's this weird nuance of like they don't let you like test in more than one browser tab, which is like annoying if you have an application that's like, hey, open this up, like, oh, you want to go to our marketing site? Like, go to this other tab. Nope, can't validate that. Just not going to write a test. So anyways, all right, let's talk about Playwright. We're coming up on time. I think it's going to be fun though. So I had like this was a roller coaster for me getting to this day. Not because I had a child in November, but because I started this presentation in this deck with that thesis, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to give Playwright another shot. You know, update my understanding of Playwright. And I saw some really cool stuff, and it just came out. So I'm looking at the top yellow line. November, CodeGen and Trace Viewer. We're going to check that out. That's really cool. But for comparison between Cypress and Playwright, so Cypress came along and said, we are going to prioritize developer experience with our framework, and that is what they did. That was the foundation of what they built the framework on, was we need to make this experience better for developers. Playwright said, look at their V1. All they call out in their release are the browsers they're supporting. They're like, we're cross-browser, we're cross-device, we're cross everything. Even now, it's not just JavaScript. You can do Playwright in Python, Java, .NET. They are like cross everything. And that is kind of a big reason why I was like, well, if it's Puppeteer and I love Puppeteer and it's for everything, it's going to be really easy to gain traction once they actually mature. I think we're reaching that threshold. Oh, I saw this cool website from like their first beta release. Is Playwright ready? Yes. That was awesome. I don't know. I wonder if they have a test for it. Okay, there's some other stuff in there, but that's the important stuff. All right, so let's do the demo. So let me close out of this stuff. I'm like done with this Cypress. I'm gonna come over here. So E2E-PW, that's my Playwright E2E folder. So I installed Playwright, and the thing I love about Playwright and what I loved about Puppeteer was like, I know how to write a JavaScript file. You know, I can spin up a new file and write something I can run in the command line. Like that's like the easiest thing to do. And that's what Puppeteer felt like, and that's what Playwright feels like. So if you love JavaScript and you're good at that, and you want to mess around with Cypress, like you should check out Playwright because it's really like just, you can start writing just JavaScript. It's cool. So you get your async awaits back. So anyways, let's see. There's a great config file in here. Got a bunch of stuff. I don't know. Does anybody look at a config file and say it's great? I don't know why I said that. Anyways, they give you some example specs. They give you some you know. So anyways, let's run this thing, right? So I've got a couple commands in here, but there's really like 3 that I'm going to go through, which is Playwright test, Playwright show report. I might even not get to that one, and then CodeGen. That's not it. I'm using Yarn. Okay, so I'm just running the example specs they sent. Everything passed. You notice nothing popped up. So like I download Playwright, I'm doing this, and I'm like, oh, same old Playwright. Like, I got to do extra work to debug this thing, you know. Okay, whatever. So let's go. Like those are the example tests. So that's how it runs. But I can do this. I can do yarn test. Is it headed? And now I get. That was quick. They're little tests. But it's running all the tests cross-browser. Like it's running it in Edge and Firefox and Chrome by default. That's cool. Especially for CI/CD. Like you could just throw this in CI like right now. It's ready to go. All right, so let's check this file out. So remember that users test I was showing you as the last one? It was the one that failed. It was like I didn't have a unique email. I'm going to write the same test in Playwright. What am I doing? Control all. Brain fart. Nope. There it is. Woo! Forgot how to code for a second. Okay. So unlike Cypress, which gives me the ability to like, oh, I just want to run this suite, like I haven't figured that out yet, so I just comment and then uncomment, and then we'll go and see what happens. I am going to run this headless because it's faster. Yeah, you're right. You might be right. Have you used Playwright before or no? Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. Oh no, I had tests fail. What the heck? All right, so check this out. There's already an HTML report that just opens up for you, and like now you can debug it. Okay, so this is the stuff that is really cool. It didn't take me long to get here. I'm going to show you Playwright Trace Viewer. What does that look like? Looks a lot like Cypress. Oh shit. Look at that. Look at the right-hand side. Man, I saw this and I was like, Playwright's got its stripes now. This is really cool. But I started writing this presentation and this didn't exist yet. It just came out. I was telling my wife, it's like when I first discovered Playwright, like Playwright's just like time behind Cypress, I feel like. And it's like my kids right now, like my daughter's 3 and my son's 5, and that 2 years difference feels significant. But in 30 years, it's not going to, right? I think we're reaching that point. Like Playwright's, like they're 30 and 32 now. Okay, what else? So you got to see Trace Viewer, you get it, right? I don't have a lot of time to go into this in great depth. Where do I need to go next? Back to my code. Okay. So this one, the fact that these two features came out together, this isn't the first time somebody's done this, a code generator for testing. But the fact that these two things came out together, did I say code gen? Hold please. No. No, it's generate, Kyle. Where is it? There it is. Sorry, guys. Generate. All right, let's see what happens. I've done this once, so this will be the second time doing it. So this opened up, I was like, what's happening? Watch this. Password, I think it was, oh, thank you. Hope that's the right password. Damn it! Oh, too many A's. Oh man, it's gonna totally screw up my test now. Yeah. So what was I doing here? I was saying add a registration, test, registrar, and then I don't know, select speakers or something. And then like search for it. Something like that, okay? That's my test. That was the test. That was the test we wrote. We wrote it in Cypress, we wrote it in Playwright. I feel like I wasted my time writing it in Playwright now. And so then I have this code gen spec. And this is the first time I did it. Sorry, guys, like I'm blowing it up so you can see it. But I think I did a side-by-side of like the original one I wrote. And I just felt like, why did I waste my time? Like there's some stuff I have to clean up in there. And to be honest, like one of the things I wasn't thrilled about, but I totally get now why it's doing, maybe it's a configuration setting, but page get by, those are locators in Playwright. And they have all these custom locators like, oh, you want to find an element by this thing. Guess what? We have a function for that. I'm like, no, I just want to give you the raw selector, the ID. So maybe I'd have to tweak that. But nonetheless, imagine being a new developer. You don't know how to write Playwright tests. You don't really know what end-to-end testing is. How powerful is that? This might as well be in the same conversation with ChatGPT and AI. Or what's the GitHub thing? Copilot, right? I mean, it's like having a junior developer right next to you. So, all right. Oh man, I gotta go. All right, so here's a side-by-side of Playwright, right? All the browsers. Forgot about Opera. Trace Viewer, that thing was cool. We didn't really dive into it. We just kind of knew what it was about, right? Code gen, documentation's really good. It's now out of the box. It wasn't so out of the box last time I did this presentation. It's quick to learn. Like I did all that in like a day. And the TypeScript config was out of the box too. I was like, oh my God, yes. And I have some carryover from the last time I presented. So like that's why I have strike throughs. Like, oh, there's no integrations because it was like V10. And like now there's integrations. Now there's packages and plugins and stuff. TypeScript config swapped over to the other like column. So I got to the point where like at the last, I'm like looking for things at this point. I'm like, it's not Cypress. So let's recall what the side-by-side was for Cypress, right? So the debugging was great, had the auto waits, and some of the browsers, yada yada yada. So now let's look at let's do this is like you want to take a picture of a slide. This might be the one to take. Hey guys, look what I learned. I can recommend an end-to-end framework now for our organization, and here's all the reasons why. See, the browsers are pretty clear who wins in that space. I still give Cypress the edge on the debugging UX. And that might be I just haven't had enough time to give Playwright its fair shake. But that Cypress UX is pretty nice, and I've gotten comfortable with it. So I give it 5 exclamation points. Trace Viewer is right next to it, though. Like, as soon as I saw that, I knew what it was about. Like, I was like, this will get the job done, you know? Code Gen, wasn't expecting that. In fact, like I have like an aversion to code generators in general because I'm better than that. Says most engineers, I think. But man, like to see the code generation be very similar to like what I had just written myself, I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then thinking of those new engineers, like documentation, I give the edge to Cypress. They're both out of the box great. TypeScript config, Playwright gets the edge. There's a learning curve for Cypress. Whereas Playwright's very friendly if you're a JS dev. Oh, by the way, if you're Python, Java, or .NET too, they have that. Oh. I mean, how do you, like, I don't know. You start to look at these arguments. And then the last point I want to make, and I'll answer your question here in a second. Cypress has very robust auto waits. So I ran the same test in Cypress, and it passed. And I ran it in Playwright, and it failed. And the reasons it failed were because of a wait issue. That alone I need to look into more. Like that doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies because I don't like flaky test suites. Go ahead.
Does Playwright also do the same sort of like mocking and the
Intercept? I think so. I have to go back and look, but I think so. So this is me right now. All right, so we're wrapping up. I'm out of time. I got to end it here. So last thing I want to tell you about is a case study from my time at Progressive, just to show you that like two outfits within the same organization can come to different conclusions. Level 20, we chose Cypress, and then Progressive, they chose Playwright. And I think the message here is that they're both really strong. They're good, right? We're splitting hairs a little bit here. That's my point. This is a slide I left over. Like, don't use Protractor anymore. You can't. Like, they sunset that thing. So, but I was trying to pitch to Progressive, like, hey, you have to choose Cypress or choose Playwright, right? I was heavy on Cypress at the time. So I was like, Cypress is the best. Just choose it. But they were like, nah, we like Playwright. It's good. It's good. I've been watching it since day one. And I go back to this. Doesn't matter the framework, right? Best practices, good habits, that's the foundation. Okay, so you can't skimp out on that with the framework. And so remember, this was my thesis I started with at the start of this talk. And I kid you not, guys, like within the last couple of days, like this is me right now. So I told you I was going to present the facts and let you decide for yourself. I happen to make a decision myself as well along the way. Going to be an interesting conversation next week at work. So there's my stuff if you need it again. Thank you for coming. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Enjoy the rest of your CodeMash.